Good evening and welcome to On the Record, I-24 News' new in-depth interview show. Every week, I'll be speaking with key experts and decision makers from Israel and around the region on the core issues concerning the Middle East. I'm honored to introduce our first guest, Ofer Shelah. Shelah is a former Knesset member and one of the founders of the Yesh Atid party, currently in the opposition. He's the director of the Israel National Security Policy Research Program at the Institute for National Security Studies. He is also one of Israel's leading sports commentators. Hi, Ofer.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive straight into it. Officially, the war in Gaza is over, or at least it has shifted to a different kind of conflict. But this was Israel's longest war, starting with the worst failure in the country's history and ending with Israel largely isolated on the global stage. So how would you describe Israel's current strategic standing?
I don't think you can speak of a single term or a single aspect in Israel's strategic standing. I think the one lasting achievement we can say now, lasting being in the Middle East sense, is the not dismantling, but the removal, for all intents and purposes, for the foreseeable future, of the Hezbollah threat in the north, both in missile and rocket fire, and a threat of invasion. Which, had you asked me on October 6th, what is the single security threat that Israel doesn't really know how to deal with, and was at the time really crippling and deterring Israel from doing stuff also on other fronts, first and foremost Iran, I would have told you Hezbollah and its threat from the north. And this is basically, once again, the foreseeable future removed, not only because of the strategic strike or the operative strike on Hezbollah, but also because the conditions inside Lebanon, the restraints that Hezbollah has inside Lebanon, and the agreement, the diplomatic agreement that Israel had with the United States, allowing it to act, to be active in deterring Hezbollah or stopping Hezbollah from rebuilding its force in the south of Lebanon. I would say that is a major strategic achievement. I'd say that in Iran, we still have, it's yet to be seen what the effects, and it may take a long time, what the effects on the strike of Iran. The mere fact that the United States took part in an Israeli strike is something in itself. It's a precedent, it's an important precedent in itself. But the effect that would have both on the Iranian nuclear program and on Iranian aggression towards Israel in general are yet to be seen. And I think that in Gaza, the danger, in my mind, of Israel being mired in Gaza and, in fact, being considered by the whole world as de facto taking over, conquering Gaza, being responsible for the fate of 2 million Palestinians, having to take care of them, and facing a diplomatic tsunami that you referred to, that danger is not yet over. So the results are, first of all, too early to really judge, and also very dynamic.
Mm-hmm. We're going to get to Lebanon and Iran in a little bit. I will just say that some will say that the focus on Hezbollah is part of, and creating a blind side to Gaza is part of what brought forth the failure of October 7th. But we are going to get to Lebanon, but specifically on Gaza. I mean, let's look at U.S. President Donald Trump's plan for Gaza, the 20-point plan. Does it have all the elements Israel needs to ensure its security moving forward? I mean, Hamas's unwillingness to disarm and cede control, we all know it. So is this plan simply bound to fail?
I'd say this. The first phase of, I was sure that the first phase is going to come through because it was very obvious and physical. Israel had to withdraw behind a certain line. Hamas had to bring back the hostages, still has not brought back all the hostages, all the bodies of the dead hostages, but the most important thing, of course, was the live hostages. And I was sure that that was going to take place. Beyond that, I think the Trump plan, the 20-point plan, is more holes than cheese. Mm-hmm. And not in the sense that the ideas are wrong. And I think the ideas also were put forth by President Biden. They were put forth by outside experts. Even we at the INSS presented similar ideas in the beginning of the war. And this is definitely, in my mind, if this is going to happen, it's going to be good for Israel's security. The thing is that everything, and we're seeing this since the completion of the first phase, or not even the first phase, the bringing back of the live hostages, we're seeing that everything in the Middle East takes a long time. Everything is complicated. Everything has a lot of details. And I'm not sure that this present administration and this president, who did great things for Israel in the agreement itself and in other aspects, but I don't think they necessarily do long-term or complicated. And to me, that would be the test, not the details of the multinational force and this board of peace or whatever, but the patience, the stamina, all external forces, starting with the United States, but also Saudi Arabia and Gulf states and Egypt and everybody else has in this sense. And once again, in my mind, the danger is that at some point they lose their patience, it'll be too complicated, it'll be too risky, and they'll just say, you want Gaza, you'll take Gaza. And since there are even political elements in Israel who want that, I think the danger is multiplied.
Yeah, I mean, do you really see soldiers from Indonesia, from Egypt, going into Hamas tunnels, dismantling them, going after Hamas's rocket launchers? I mean, is this a viable scenario in your eyes?
No, it's not. And I think it's obvious to everybody that the only security guard, so to speak, for this agreement is the IDF. But there's a huge difference between the IDF doing this as part of this diplomatic agreement, which has a future both for Gaza and for the Palestinians in general, and includes the PA, or the IDF doing this because Israel has decided that for security reasons, for ideological reasons, for whatever reasons, it is going to practically take over Gaza. Mm-hmm. And this was the direction we were heading before the agreement. So in that sense, even what we have now is better than we were before the agreement took place. Of course, also because of the hostage question. But the danger is still there. And the fact that, once again, the parts of the present government, the present coalition in Israel want that, enhances this danger.
Yeah, look, this current coalition refuses reintroducing the PA to Gaza, even though it is clearly stated that if this plan makes it through, it's going to happen very quickly. What do you make of the deployment of U.S. forces in Israel, just 20 miles away from the border with Gaza? Is this another sign of the U.S. commitment to Israel's security, or a nod to Jerusalem not to go too far off script and to stick to the plan?
I'm not sure that you could call it really deployment. There are officers there, there's a staff there. It's not like American boots on the ground, ensuring Israel's security. I think they are there mostly to show that the entities, the administration and everybody else who signed this agreement mean business. I think they're there because that's the American way. You create a structure and you fill it underneath. I don't see American soldiers or Indonesian or anybody else, as you said, risking their lives in Gaza. And all you need to do in order to combat that is, 500 men with AK-47s, and Hamas has got thousands of them. So once again, as I said, there's more hole than cheese in the following stages. But if all sides are determined, if they have the stamina, both the United States and the Arab partners, yes, this may not be exactly the 20-point plan, but it may be something of that kind, and then you could even deploy the IDF in different positions than it is now. The other alternative is that Hamas is not disarmed. and the Hamas is going to be there as a political force anyway. I don't think, I think everybody knows that this is the case. And also, Hamas is a political force in the West Bank. So within the Palestinian people, the Palestinian entity, whatever it is, Hamas is still going to be there. There may be a chance that over time, Hamas will maintain its some kind of weaponry. The question then would be, what kind of freedom would Israel enjoy to coerce, to create some kind of coercion, the kind of which we have in Lebanon. And once again, and this is important, in Lebanon, what helps make this more stable is the agreement we have with the United States and the internal pressure that Hezbollah has. You have to have a diplomatic, a political arrangement that follows military activity. Otherwise, definitely in a situation like it is in Gaza, military activity is going to be bogged down and eventually fail. And this is something that we've so far failed to have. I hope we will have following this 20-point plan or the current agreement.
Yeah, so on Lebanon, I mean, the ceasefire has two elements. There's the diplomatic agreement that you're talking about, but there's also the disarmament of Hezbollah, which is not really something that we're seeing. The Lebanese government vowed to disarm Hezbollah by the end of the year, but it's clearly not going to happen. So is it the fact that the Lebanese government cannot disarm Hezbollah, or that it doesn't want to?
Look, I don't want to get too deep into the history of Lebanon and the political structure there, which is very complicated. But we did, and I look at it in Middle Eastern through Middle Eastern eyes. I don't really care for formalities there. We, due to the Israeli strike on Hezbollah, we came into a situation where prior to October 7th and even prior to the summer of 2024, Hezbollah was the single most powerful force in Lebanon. It was much stronger than the Lebanese army. And Hezbollah created some kind of paralysis that sort of coerced Lebanon to be in war with Israel, even though most Lebanese did not want that, and so on. This has changed. The idea that this will change to a degree that Hezbollah, once again, will not have a single rifle or a single rocket, I don't think that's important. I don't really think that's important. First of all, I mean, look at what has already happened. Hezbollah was built and armed by Iran over close to 2 decades for a single purpose. It was to be the deterring forces should Israel decide to attack Iran, and then and did deter Israel from doing that for many years. And then we attack in Iran. No matter, if you wanted to talk, we'll discuss the outcome of this attack. But Hezbollah stands pat. Why? Because it was struck, because its leadership was taken away, because it has those internal pressures. This, to me, is much more important than the false idea that we're going to disarm Hezbollah and they're all going to be, I don't know, farmers and stockbrokers. This is not going to happen. And I think it's a political goal, or a politically stated goal, much more than it is a real goal.
So let's stick in our immediate neighborhood. Jerusalem and Damascus, they've been engaged in talks for many months now, which became public not too long ago, over a security agreement. But we mustn't forget the background of its self-appointed interim leader. So do you think Israel should give President Ahmed al-Shara a chance?
The short answer is yes, but it depends what you mean by a chance. I think any security arrangement on the ground that is approved by the professionals in Israel is a good thing. I think that for that, I think some of the ground that we've been holding since the fall of the Assad regime, I don't know what good it does. For example, the Hermon Mountain Summit. Okay, I can tell you a personal story. After the Yom Kippur War, in February of 1974, it was my father was a paratrooper reserve battalion commander in the war, and it was his troops who were there, and they were barely rescued by Sayeret Matkal recon force that actually lost one of its soldiers on the way up there because they couldn't stay there over the winter. Okay, so I'm not saying this is exactly what's going to happen, but this idea that was that is understandable under the circumstances, that the Assad regime just fell. Let's make sure physically that we have as many physical gains in destroying its air force, in its rocket threat, and so on. I think we should give Shara a chance in the sense that we will not create pressure that will seem hostile to Ashara. There's no need for now to be hostile to Ashara. And that, of course, also has to do with the relationship between Israel and Turkey, because Turkey is I'm not saying that he's a Turkish puppet or anything, but Turkey was the great supporter of his forces as they reached Damascus, and Turkey, of course, has border issues with Syria. So we should look at this as a whole. The idea is, in my mind, what's important to us in Syria is first and foremost to prevent the recreation of some kind of axis, some kind of ring of fire around Israel like we had before the war and before the fall of the Assad regime.
Mm-hmm. As you say in Hebrew, respect him and suspect him.
Yeah, that's sage advice for anybody in the Middle East.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about the proxy network. One key proxy we didn't talk about, perhaps the last one standing, are the Houthis that have proven to be not only a threat to Israel but to maritime shipping and to the region with their increasing threat. So, and they have vowed to renew strikes against Israel whenever they decide. So, what does Israel need to do to address the ongoing threat from Yemen?
First of all, I thought that what Israel needed to do was to turn the Houthi thing as much as it could into an international thing. And let's be honest, the running to bomb shelters because of Houthi missiles was not a happy experience for us. But the damage, for example, to Egypt, to the Egyptian economy, because of the closing down, the de facto closing down of the Suez Canal, was much more serious. And lo and behold, the world or Egypt did not do much about it. I think the worrying thing is that, in fact, a major maritime throughway, the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, has been closed for a while now. Everybody got used to it. Even, maritime shipping prices have been going low, have been decreasing over time. As they spiked up after this sort of blockade began, and now they're going back down. And the world seems to say, okay, it's Israel's problem, it's Egypt's problem, maybe it's Jordan's problem because of
Clearly
Aqaba.
It's not.
And it's not our problem. And we, being the U.S. or Britain or Europe, we're not going to do much about it. And this is a lesson for us, because it means you look at, for example, the eastern side of the Mediterranean. Let's say there's a blockade by somebody in the middle of the Mediterranean. Okay, the world might say, okay, this is a problem of Syria, Lebanon, Israel, basically Egypt, maybe. Okay, the idea that if we my a conclusion for that is not that we should do everything by ourselves. We've been fighting the Houthis as much as we can so far, and it doesn't seem to affect them. We've killed their chief of staff. Doesn't seem to affect them much, and so on. It means that when you deal with the world, and when you see yourself starting from Gaza and going all the way to Yemen or to Tehran, as part of a global order, you should be ready to incorporate yourself, to immerse yourself within that order all the way through, and not only when it's convenient for you, or only when you're forced to do that, as basically this government and this prime minister were forced to do by the United States regarding Gaza.
We haven't heard the last from the Houthis. Okay, let's move on to the last part of the show. I want to do a quick rapid fire round. I'll show you 3 pictures, on the screen over here, and you respond with the first thing that comes to mind. So let's take a look at the first picture.
Look, as I said, Qatar and Turkey gained the most from what's been happening in the past few months, and also it shows it relates to the what seems to be the major motive for this American president, who, on the one hand, as I said, most of what President Trump did was positive for Israel. On the other hand, think of what the scene that we had with Netanyahu in the White House, where Netanyahu is forced to read this dictated apology to Qatar, and there's a Qatari person, we learn later, there's a Qatari person in the room overseeing that Netanyahu would read every, comma, and this is what I think about it, and this is the way this president runs the world. And it's once again, so far been positive for Israel, but we have to be aware of the negative side of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure everyone here in Israel is happy about the Trump administration cozying up. It's not just the Trump administration, I should say. Consistent administrations have been cozying up to Qatar. Let's move on to the next photo.
Look, Erdogan, Israel and Turkey were always on very, very good terms. And even in the first Erdogan years, when he started to be hostile, we still had great military cooperation with Turkey, great intelligence. Yeah, I don't know if people know that. Mossad, at least in 2 instances that I'm aware of, prevented terrorist attacks on Turkey, on Turks, not on Jews or Israeli targets and so on. And Erdogan has his own ambitions. And has definitely a animosity towards Israel. But, being in conflict with Turkey for Israel is a very, very complicated thing. And once again, I would see the not the resolution of it, but the management of it through international eyes. Israel will not deter Turkey. Israel will not frighten Turkey. I don't think Israel needs to be frightened of Turkey. But Turkey is also a NATO member, so it's a very complex player, and we need to deal that intelligently through the once again the international structure of the Middle East.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they are indeed end up being part of the multinational force in Gaza. Let's take a look at the third and last picture.
Look, I'm one of the few people in Israel who actually drafted and actually passed through the Knesset a draft bill in 2014. It's not the draft bill that we voted in 2014 is not relevant now. I'll tell you 2 things. One, to me, always the major problem with the Haredi not going into service was not only that after October 7th, there's a lot of talk about the army needs. The army needs more soldiers, needs more combat soldiers. To me, the problem was the readiness, the willingness of the serving public to continue to serve and to be under this huge burden, which has become much larger since October 7th, when 1 in every 6 would be soldiers is exempt from military service. And of course, there was intent on this in this present coalition to pass a law where that would make it, even a basic law in Israel. And I think the other thing is that there are practical, I wouldn't say solutions, but there are practical things to be done. For example, I'm involved in some of them. Some of my Haredi friends and the Haredi people that I talk to claim that you could create a reserve force of thousands of Haredi ready to really serve for 1 month in defending borders and so on. And this would not solve the draft issue, and this would not solve the first thing that I talked about. But I'm putting this forth because the problem is that the Haredi service problem has become not a practical problem to be addressed. I'm not saying solved, but to be addressed. But it became the focal point of the identity clash in Israel. And once things get there, everybody tends to be less practical. So it's a real problem there.
It'll be interesting to see if it is also a key issue in these upcoming elections.
It will, of course.
Fascinating stuff. Obviously, we could go on and on. We also didn't even touch about this golden age of Israelis in the NBA, but unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. That's all the time we have this week. I want to thank you again, Ofer Shelah, for your time and interesting insight. Join us again next week.